John Oldman watches the flames crackling in the fireplace, lost in thoughts of the ancient campfires and the people who once gathered around them. This moment unfolds in a museum, close to an exhibition about a primitive tribe. His girlfriend Carolyn is guiding a tour, explaining that the Cro-Magnon tribe was much like contemporary humans, sharing the same geological period, the Holocene, which followed the Ice Age. They experienced the same hopes, fears, and family ties, though they would have likely appreciated modern comforts like antibiotics and sneakers, as most didn't live beyond 35. The students chuckle, but Carolyn mourns how the tribe would be appalled by what humans have done to the world, noting that today's society is filled with internet addicts. In another room, two students are preoccupied, one sketching the exhibits and the other glued to her phone. Suddenly, Tara spots Professor Yang, as Oldman is now called, and asks why he's there. Isabel jokingly mentions his supposed age of 100, but Tara insists he's only about 40 and decides to seize the moment. The girls approach John, who engages them with a playful quiz. Tara suggests a selfie in front of the cave paintings, but he declines, inviting Isabel to browse his collection of books anytime. Later, John sits at the table, reflecting on his appearance and noticing the first signs of aging. He recalls a gathering of friends a decade prior when Edith remarked on his agelessness. Now that seems to be changing. He later leads a couple through the museum, sharing insights from Buddha, emphasizing that people can transform their vices into virtues. A discussion about Buddha unfolds, with students speculating his nature. John clarifies that he was simply a man who deeply contemplated humanity and achieved enlightenment. Isabel compares Buddha to Jesus, and a student mentions the common narrative of resurrection. John challenges them to think critically, reminding them that knowledge is not merely confirmation of beliefs. Philip asserts he believes in Jesus' holiness, and John quotes renowned thinkers on faith, urging them to reflect on Buddha's teachings. Isabel notes the shared values of generosity and non-judgment, while Leo points out Buddha's advice to question sacred texts. An argument ensues about their differing philosophies, but John clears up misconceptions before concluding the discussion. After class, the students debate religion, and Tara suggests inviting John to a party, intrigued by the depth of his thoughts. That evening, as John prepares dinner, Isabel arrives asking for a book, and he encourages her to choose freely. Carolyn soon joins them, and John mentions wanting to go hunting, but Carolyn invites him to the party instead. Isabel is absorbed in the book she borrowed from Yang when Tara arrives. Isabel shares that it's Professor Jenkins' book, signed to his dear friend John Oldman. Tara is intrigued by the wordplay between Yang and Old, questioning if it's a joke. Checking the publication date, they see it was released in 2007, which means John was about 33 then. Not exactly old, which might explain why Jenkins referred to him that way. The girls discuss Jenkins, a respected archaeologist and author, whose latest book, *The Longest Night with a Man from Earth*, features a nighttime dialogue with John Oldman, but it led to Jenkins' downfall. He faced ridicule for suggesting that his savior walks among us, forcing him to retreat from public life. Tara notes the description sounds similar to Yang, and they decide they want to read that book. Meanwhile, Carolyn finds John packing for the night. He mentions needing solitude and sensing something is off. He struggles with tasks that used to come easily. Carolyn tells him it's just aging, and if he wants to hide in the woods like a caveman, he can do so. John heads to the forest, climbs a hill, and takes in the landscape. At the same time, Isabel and Tara are with Philip at Leo's place. Isabel shares all the peculiar things they've learned about John Yang. His alleged age of 14,000 years, his claimed acquaintances with figures like Columbus and Van Gogh, and how he supposedly assumed different identities, including Jesus of Nazareth. She notes how everything they've heard about Christ seems to align with John. Philip is incredulous, questioning how this could be true. Isabel brings up Arthur Jenkins, explaining how he investigated John Oldman, revealing that until 2001 there were no records of him. Documents like his driver's license and tax returns were all fabricated. Jenkins discovered 2 colleges where John supposedly taught, noting that the names appeared with a 10-year gap, suggesting John erases his history every time he reinvents his life. Philip insists he's not bothered by the tales since they're just stories. If he believed every fantasy, he wouldn't be so religious. Isabel shows him a book containing a profile photo of a man who resembles John, even though John never allows himself to be photographed. At Arthur Jenkins' house, he reads an email from Isabel Chang wanting to discuss Oldman and dismisses her request along with John's name. Meanwhile, the young people head to John Yang's home, knowing Carolyn isn't around, and plan to search the place. They spot a Van Gogh painting but dismiss it as a forgery. Leo goes down to the basement and discovers a box filled with books on history and religion, all authored by different people but credited to John. Dr. Cruz arrives, prompting the trio to escape through a hidden passage. Before leaving, Isabel takes a photo of a couple. In the forest, John injures his hand on a rock and the bleeding wound doesn't seem to be healing. Isabel later reports that her cousin, an art expert, believes the Van Gogh painting is genuine. Leo adds that he contacted publishing houses and found no records of the authors of historical works. Each one had vanished before their books were published. Dr. Jenkins receives another call from Isabel, who is convinced that her professor is John Oldman and wants to talk, sensing something is off with John Yang. Meanwhile, John wakes up in the forest and heads to his car, still troubled by his unhealing hand. Isabel gets a call from an elderly woman who worked at a college in Idaho, mentioning she saw a letter and recognized John from a photo. He had vanished back in 1957. They contacted 60 colleges across 14 states, and Jenkins notes that Professor Yang is an exact look-alike of two professors. Jenkins requests a new photo of John, saying they have nothing to discuss otherwise. The trio arrives at class a bit early and tries to take a photo with their favorite professor, but he quickly turns away and asks them to turn off their phones. Disappointed, they debate what to do next. Perhaps they should just tell the truth. Isabel recalls prophets and seers suggesting that Yang could be one of them since he's clearly very intelligent and they should heed his words. Philip mocks the idea, suggesting they might as well worship him. Isabel counters that he could correct inaccuracies about Jesus, but Philip warns that if that's true, then everything millions believe would turn into fiction. Philip strongly disagrees with the group's theories, but that night they sneak up to the professor's house and manage to snap a photo of him while he's asleep. Jenkins receives the picture and notes that if it is John, he's changed. He promises to come. Meanwhile, John is tending to his injured hand when Tara enters, apologizing and then confessing her love for him. She tries to get close, but John gently rejects her, saying it's not possible. Tara hints that she knows his true identity, but John dismisses her and shows her out. Tara later tells Isabel about her visit, and the girls realize that John will likely disappear for good now. Isabel urgently contacts Jenkins. Carolyn says her goodbyes to John, confused as to why he's leaving when everything seemed perfect. John reminds her he never made any promises, though Carolyn is visibly upset. Wishing him a Merry Christmas, she departs. Meanwhile, Jenkins is speeding down a highway at night, assuring John he'll be there in 2 hours. Back at John's house, he burns old photographs in the fireplace, preparing to leave. His group of students arrives, begging him to stay. He tells them to go away, but Leo pulls out Jenkins' book, insisting it proves everything. John dismisses the book, saying it's just fiction. He's not responsible for what Arthur Jenkins wrote. Isabel counters, claiming they want to help spread the word of God. John, baffled, denies being Jesus and insists they are imagining things. Just as he turns his back, Leo suddenly tases him, knocking him unconscious. At that moment, Jenkins calls, informing them that his car has broken down and he's still an hour away. The group splits up. Philip stays with John while the others go to find Jenkins. Philip drags John to the basement, tying him to a chair. John pleads to be set free, but Philip insists John must stay so he can learn the truth. Clearly frustrated, John asks why Philip is so angry, suspecting it's connected to Jesus. Philip opens up, revealing his painful childhood with an alcoholic father. His family found refuge in the church, where they were baptized and reborn. This deepened Philip's connection with Christ. He admits that John is the best teacher he's ever had, knowing more about the Bible than anyone else. He wonders if God sent John to walk the earth, gather wisdom, and spread knowledge. But if John is really Jesus, then everything people believe in would be a lie. John explains that 2,000 years ago, he did preach in Galilee, but his teachings were misunderstood and he eventually left. Recently, he's noticed changes in himself, wrinkles, gray hair, and an inability to heal. He's unsure what's happening, but something about him is different and he might even be dying. John begs Philip to untie him, but Philip questions why. If he's the Son of God, John can't free himself. John insists he's just a man and there are many paths to enlightenment. Heaven doesn't have to wait. It can be created here and now. Philip grows suspicious, saying John doesn't sound like Christ at all. He seems more like the Antichrist. John dismisses the idea, explaining that the concept of the Antichrist wasn't in the Bible, but was invented by superstitious monks. It doesn't refer to any single person. However, Philip, increasingly agitated, accuses John of being like the seven-headed serpent who heals himself, blasphemes God, and distorts the Bible. He ominously adds, all that's missing are the 3 sixes. John proposes a test of faith to Philip. If he is truly a beast, Philip should kill him. But if he's Jesus, then he will die and rise again. John gives Philip an ultimatum, either kill him or let him go. In a moment of desperation, Philip stabs John in the side and John collapses, unconscious. Horrified by what he's done, Philip flees. Soon after, John's friends and Dr. Jenkins arrive at his house, trying to contact Philip, but he doesn't respond. Jenkins shares the story of his long history with John. As they enter the house, they notice bloodstains leading down to the basement, where they find a broken chair and more blood. Confused, they speculate about what could have happened. If an ambulance had come, why was there still blood? John must have left on his own, yet the Van Gogh painting remains untouched. Tara and Leo rush off to call local hospitals. Meanwhile, through the hilly terrain, Harry walks, calling out for John. John, now sporting a gray beard and looking exhausted, appears and admits that his side still hurts, though he used to heal much faster. He jokes that he's a Holocene man now, but Harry corrects him, saying it's already the Anthropocene, the age in which humans have transformed the environment so drastically that the previous epoch is ending. John reflects that this makes sense. He too is ending with the epoch. Nobody can live forever, he muses. Harry then asks John for help, explaining that his father has been sick and he wants John to visit their home. John agrees and gets into his car. Elsewhere, an FBI agent visits Dr. Jenkins, investigating Philip's disappearance. Could John have kidnapped him? Jenkins doubts it, explaining that while John once hunted animals, it's unlikely he would harm a young man. However, the agent reveals something disturbing. John's description matches that of a young man who supposedly died long ago, but witnesses have spotted him at various crime scenes, always with a different name and in different places. The implication is unsettling. Could John or G be an immortal serial killer? Jenkins admits it's possible but remains non-committal. Meanwhile, critics of John's story have not fully embraced the second chapter, dismissing it as a mere retelling of the original events. However, this time the narrative unfolds through the eyes of young people, just starting their lives. Perhaps that's why they interpret John's story differently and are even willing to follow him, believing the mission to share his truth with the world. In any case, Jenkins concludes creation is multifaceted, and in this world, even the impossible might just be possible. If you enjoy the recap, make sure to subscribe, lads.